You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't touch that dial or change the channel because it's 7 p.m. on Sunday and you're listening to The Hard Truth. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Deaton on iHeart's WRKO 680 AM. If you can hear that little despondent in my voice, it's because it's been a rough week. America just witnessed a heinous crime, not just on an individual, that individual is Charlie Kirk, but our republic. And it's very difficult. I got to tell you, I don't know, never met Charlie Kirk, never had the pleasure, never had the honor to talk to him. I agree with some of the things that Charlie Kirk talked about. I disagree with some things that Charlie Kirk believes. You know, he was an adamant pro-life person. I believe in a woman's unrestricted right up until a certain point to have an abortion. Doesn't mean I favor late-term abortions or anything like that, but up until a certain point, I believe a woman does have a right. So we have stark differences on things, but I was shook, like many of you out there. First of all, it's not about politics. This is a 31-year-old young man who has a 1-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter and a young wife. He was just starting his family, man. And shortly after his murder, I was at a softball practice for my daughter, Layla. And I was sitting there, and Christy and I were talking, and Christy was actually crying that this man that we have never met, named Charlie Kirk, with his 2 young kids, was never going to get to experience that, right? He's never going to get to experience a soccer game, ballet classes for his daughter, karate, or any of the many, many things that kids join when they're young. And so it's more than a tragedy, like I said. And it appears to be a targeted hit. And I say that because, not because he was shot from 200 yards and it was a kill shot. Certainly wasn't someone who never shot a rifle before, but if you get the right rifle with the high-powered scope, 200 yards is not that far. In the Marine Corps, even as a lawyer, I was trained at 500 yards. So the reason I think it was a professional, organized type hit is because the suspect hasn't been caught as of me recording this show. 2 suspects, or people of interest, I should say, were talked to, and then they were released. The FBI has put out 2 photographs of the suspect. They say they have video of the suspect. And I'm confident that the FBI will, in fact, arrest eventually the suspect who did this. And I think we're going to find out that there's more than one person involved. And the reason I say that is because the reason why this looks to me like a professional type hit is because of the exit strategy. This was planned. This was premeditated. There had to be an exit strategy where this person disappeared shortly after the shooting and probably had people help. There's a lot of conspiracy theories online right now. There were people that looked like they could be signaling the shooter based on their arm movements. Of course, the question that Charlie was answering related to two things: transgenderism and mass shootings. And as he's answering a question about mass shooting, right after it referenced to transgenderism, he is killed. And so many people don't believe that that was an accident, that that question was coordinated with the killer. And so I believe there's more than one person involved. There was also evidence of a private jet shortly, like 30 minutes after the killing, took off basically their transponder. It's called something else nowadays, but it's basically what allows air traffic controller to see your altitude, to see exactly where you are on the radar. And you're not supposed to turn that off unless it's an emergency or some other scenario. And that was turned off and then later turned on. So there's going to be investigations about that as well. Now, the reason why I said that this was not just an attack on Charlie Kirk, but an attack on our republic is because that's how America was formed, how America was born. America was born in heated debate. You know, from our founders, the Federalist Papers were all about heated argument related to the Constitution. I mean, Hamilton and Madison went at it. They didn't really like each other either, but they didn't use bullets. They used words. They used persuasion. So you can even feel and hear the tense debate as you read through the Federalist Papers. So we go back to the Lincoln-Douglas debates about slavery. Do you know how heated that was? Do you know how passionate that was? But it remained civil and respectful no matter how heated. And the reason why I say it was an attack on our republic, because if we resort to violence related to heated political discourse, then we're done. We don't just lose our way. If that happens, we lost our soul as a country. And the reason it was an attack is because Charlie Kirk, even though I don't agree with everything he says, he's out there doing what we're supposed to do. He's on a tour called American Comeback Tour, where he's literally telling people, come see me, and debate me. He says, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it. And you can come prove me wrong. And someone would come up, and it could be someone who is diametrically opposed to what Charlie Kirk stands for. And Charlie would say, let's be respectful, let's be civil, and engage with that person. And the reality is that Charlie Kirk was good at it. He was one of the best, extremely brilliant young man, extremely well-read. And so when he says, prove me wrong, come and debate me, instead of debating him, they kill him. They kill him. And they killed a father, and they killed a husband, and a family is devastated. And so, you know, the rifle that was found at this stage in the investigation, as far as I'm concerned, and as a former federal prosecutor, I would oversee some of these types of investigations. You have to have a completely open mind. They found the rifle, and there was on ammunition, there was references to transgenderism. And then that goes back to the question that Charlie was asked as he was murdered. But the question is, since you can't find the suspect, Was that rifle meant to be found? Was that evidence meant to be found? Was that a distraction, a diversion, or was the person in a rush? Normally, if someone emotionally says, I'm going to go kill Charlie Kirk, they would make much more mistakes. They'd be in custody already. So that's why I think that this person not only had training with that rifle at 200 yards, enough to basically do what's called a kill shot. A kill shot is you don't hit center of mass because the person could be wearing a bulletproof vest. You hit the neck, you hit the head. And that's what the person did. And the video that I saw that many of you saw, when I saw the close-up, I prayed to God that it was AI and that it was fake. And because I told Christy after seeing that video, I said, listen, that's an unsurvivable shot. That's a kill shot. There is no surviving it. No human being is going to survive a shot like that when your body reacts the way it did, and all of the blood and the artery hit and all of those things. And so, you know, and of course, we have to learn from this. You know, Patrick, who produces this show with me, brought up the fact that you know, he owns drones, and there's questions, right? Like, why wasn't drones used? Surveillance drones cost $2,000, and you can, you know, survey and surveillance the rooftops around them. Obviously, there was, you know, security breaches as well, and hopefully when we get to public speakers, we can learn from this mistake and provide better security. But the fact that people have to worry that they're going to be murdered because they say something unpopular or they say something that someone disagrees with, it is not who we are as a country. We can't be that country. That's not America. That's not the America that I fought in the Marine Corps for 7 years for. So when we come back from the break, we'll unpack some more about Charlie Kirk and his murder. Stay with me. You're listening to The Hard Truth. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. You can reach the show at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. I'm still a little shook. You know, we were talking about Charlie Kirk and the fact that this young man, this father, this husband, lost his life. And there's a lot of people in politics, as far as I'm concerned, that share in the blame. And it's on both sides. And, you know, we can debate whether it's more of the left or more on the right. You have you know, morons like Seth Moulton, who gets on TV and he, you know, uses this example and then says, oh, but most of the violence in America is coming from the right, not the left. I mean, so sick of these politicians, these elected leaders. You know, just say it's a tragedy. You know, Elizabeth Warren, all of them, they get on TV and they say, you know, it's a tragedy, and my hearts and prayers are to this family, the Kirk family, and my thoughts and prayers are with his wife and young children. But, and I just want to tell him, stop. Just stop. There's no but. Just say that it's a tragedy and say that your heart goes out to this young family. Don't turn it into, now you're going to talk about gun control. Like Massachusetts has one of the most restrictive gun laws in America. That could have happened here. That rifle is now outlawed, all right? It wasn't an AR-15. It wasn't an AK-47. It was a high-powered bolt-action rifle, okay? Hunters use that kind of rifle. And so unless you're going to take the position that the Second Amendment doesn't exist, using this as an example of how we've got to have, more laws preventing these type of guns, it doesn't make any sense, okay? And so you have many states that have these high, strict gun laws. Schools, guns aren't allowed near schools, but we have gun shootings. And if we just did away with the Second Amendment and banned all guns, all you would do is create the best black market for weapons in the world, because they're not going to go away. You think that a ban is going to stop people from getting guns if they want to get guns? We have laws against cocaine. People still use it. We had prohibition where you banned alcohol, and it became one of the most lucrative black markets in history. And so instead of always just wanting to talk your political points and peak your agenda, just say you feel bad for a human being. You feel bad for his kids. Don't say but. All right? And some of them are but. And the people who are blaming Charlie Kirk and say, oh, you reap what you roll because he was a defender of the Second Amendment. Okay, just because he believed in something that you didn't believe in, or just because he feels strongly about something that you don't feel as strong about, doesn't mean the man deserved to get shot and killed. Okay, so save us with your, projection and your politics and your agenda and all your other nonsense that you engage in. Just say you're sorry. It's a tragedy. And that violence has no place in our politics. It's called the First Amendment. Okay, it's in the Constitution. You have the right to get up and say something that you believe in. If you think DEI is bad, you can get up and say DEI is bad. If you think climate control is the most existential threat in the world today, then you're allowed to say it. People can disagree with you. Okay, but this is what happens. These politicians, okay, use words like Hitler, monster, traitor, threat of democracy, fascism. And what that does when you engage in these dehumanization tactics, this dehumanizing rhetoric that these elected leaders engage in, what you're doing is you're saying to these unstable people out there, yes, they must be eliminated. This person is Hitler. This person is a dictator. This person is evil. This person is a threat to democracy, to our way of life. We must eliminate them. If you talk like that, you're going to incite them. You're going to incite people. So how about you just dial down the damn rhetoric? How about instead of insults, you offer better ideas? How about that? How about better ideas, not better insults? That's probably, I think, a way to go. I think a lot of voters and people out there would appreciate that, But we have come in this society from heated debate at town halls to now social media and echo chambers, where you have people who hide behind avatars and fake names, and they say vile things, and they get to cheer each other on. I mean, and we've seen some of the most vile things, even here in Massachusetts. You had, Framingham and other places, teachers who teach our kids celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder and assassination. You had people, literally cheering what happened. Are you kidding me? Is that how far that we have fallen as a society? And so, hopefully, people ask me, what do I think this will result in? And what I said is that I hope 1,000 Charlie Kirks on both sides. Liberal Charlie Kirks, conservative Charlie Kirks, but people who take the same approach. I'm going to debate you. I'm going to tell you why I think the way I do, why I think this is bad policy. And I encourage you to come meet me face to face, not online, face to face, and let's use respect and civility, and let's challenge each other. That's America. And I think that's why I was taking Charlie Kirk's death so hard, even though I have no connection to this man, and I disagree with many of the things that he says. But anyways, you know, it is an absolute tragedy, and I don't know where we're headed in this country. I really don't. The media is never going to help. I mean, not in addition to the murder of Charlie Kirk, we saw the murder on public transit in North Carolina, that young Ukrainian refugee, 23 years old, who got off her work shift, minding her business, gets on public transit system, sits in front of an individual who happens to be a black man, who then takes out his pocket knife and, unbeknownst to her, stands up behind her and thrusts that knife several times into her neck and body. And then he walks around the transit with blood dripping everywhere and uttering the words, "I got that white girl. I got that white girl." Not one Samaritan helped that girl. Not one person tried to stop that person. That's what shocked me. Other than the brutality of this murder, the fact that none of those people reacted. And that saddened me. Obviously her death saddened me, but that also saddened me. This guy that murdered her was arrested 14 times. 14 times. I'm not misstating that. His mother wanted him locked up, his own mother. And a young woman's life is over. And why? He was released by a magistrate in North Carolina who's not even a lawyer. A person who was hired because they are allowed to do that in North Carolina. And this person, this magistrate, asked him, "Do you promise to come back to the next hearing?" And he says, "Yes." That magistrate didn't do any analysis whatsoever on public safety, no evaluation of whether this man was stable enough to be released in public. She just says, "Hey, will you come back?" And he says yes. So a complete and utter failure of our criminal justice system. But we're seeing that not just in North Carolina, we're seeing that here in Massachusetts. We're seeing it all across the country, where we have gotten into this softness on law and order. You have, people like Mayor Wu, who we'll talk about, who will protect a child rapist from being detected by ICE. I mean, we should all be able to agree that a child rapist should not be out on $500 bond, which has happened in Massachusetts several times in the last couple of years, and that person should be handed over to ICE because they're an illegal alien on top of that. You're listening to The Hard Truth. We'll come back right back. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Before the break, we were talking about that poor Ukrainian 23-year-old who was murdered on the public transit system. We were talking about the failure of our criminal justice system. We're talking about this lax attitude when it comes to law enforcement, holding criminals responsible. Listen, I've been a federal prosecutor, all right? And we've got to get back to holding people responsible for their personal actions. But we got to inject common sense. We were talking about here in Massachusetts, we have seen case after case after case of someone charged with something heinous, rape, child rape, and they're let out. And on top of that, they're illegal. They're here illegally. And they're let out on $500 cash bond. By the way, the $500 they put up, guaranteed, was supplied by the taxpayers because Maura Healey is just handing out your tax dollars to illegals. $4 billion in 4 years. $4 billion. Okay? At the same time that she said there was no money to save Kearney Hospital in Dorchester. At the same time that she said there was no money to save Neshoba Medical Valley Center in Central Mass. So we lost 2 hospitals in critical areas. A pregnant woman in parts of Central Mass has to drive 45 minutes to give birth now because we didn't have any money, according to Maura Healey. But we had $4 billion that we would be able to pay for these illegals, including the ones who have committed heinous crimes. It's got to stop. Like this craziness where in North Carolina, a non-lawyer magistrate, how come someone arrested 14 times isn't before a real judge? And I got to tell you, there's a saying on X, and I've come to agree with it completely. And that saying is that you don't hate the mainstream media enough. And this Ukrainian girl example, her murder, is another example of it. You know, earlier before we took the break, I brought up the fact that there was no Good Samaritans that protected that Ukrainian girl. And to be fair, like this attack happened so fast, there may not have been a reaction time to prevent her death. But people saw him walking around with blood pouring down, saying, I got that white girl, and no one steps up to do anything. And we got to ask ourselves why. Well, one reason why was because in New York, there was that fella, and his last name was Penny, who restrained a person, an assailant, and had him in a chokehold. He was someone who had served in the Marine Corps. And there was so many articles because they had a picture of a white guy with a chokehold on an African-American male. And then there were so many things. Did he use excessive force? Should he have done that? Should he have intervened? All those things. And he was called all kinds of things, like he's a racist, a white supremacist. The media ran with it. Now we flip to the Ukraine murder of that Ukraine girl, and days go by, and there is no story about it. Nobody's writing. Wall Street Journal's not writing about it. The New York Times not writing about it. MSNBC, CNN, none of them are talking about it. And so people like Charlie Kirk pointed out that, wait a minute, if a white guy had brutally murdered a beautiful young black woman and then walked away saying, I got that black girl, or I got that, yeah, if that's what he said, I got the black girl, it would have been thousands of articles by mainstream media. But because it didn't fit a narrative, right? Because it was a black guy killing a white girl, it didn't fit their narrative. They wouldn't even run the story. And then they finally run the story, And what they say is that the Ukrainian death and that murder is being used as a new MAGA talking point. That MAGA is trying to make a race issue out of it. And you had everybody like Van Jones get on CNN. Nobody knows what this guy, why he did it. They're ignoring the fact that there's a tape that he says, I got the white girl. But they don't tell you that. No one knows. And this guy was hurting. That's what they said on MSNBC and CNN. He has mental health issues. And he was hurting, and hurt people. It's like, what? He's a criminal. Arrested 14 times for assaults, for very bad stuff. And you're going to sit there and talk about like he's a victim? It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And we get to the Charlie Kirk murder. And I saw a clip on MSNBC where the person speculated that maybe Charlie Kirk was shot by one of his supporters who was celebrating with a gun and just fired the gun and accidentally shot and killed Charlie Kirk. What? What the F are you talking about, man? Because they wanted to use this murder to fit their agenda, right? That guns are out of control and we've got to ban all guns in the world. And instead of just acknowledging what a tragedy this is, but also the nature. You have a man engaging in heated civil debate because we don't talk to each other anymore. We just sit as, internet warriors on X, fake names, and we say things to each other. Oh, Trump is a rapist. Trump is a xenophobe. Trump is Hitler. Trump needs to go. Someone needs to eliminate Trump. Then there's an assassination attempt. Oh, see, we need gun control. They call Charlie Kirk a white supremacist and that he's a threat to democracy and that he's all these bad things, that he's evil. And then he's murdered for simply engaging in what made America great: civil heated debate, political discourse. Not online, but face to face, human to human, because we got to talk to each other. And he's shot and killed in cold blood. No doubt a specific premeditated plan was executed in addition to Charlie. And what do? The Elizabeth Warrens of the world, the Seth Moultons of the world, they want to get on their soapbox and turn it into their talking points. And then blame actually the person who was murdered. It's disgusting. It makes you not want to get in politics. I told you I'm thinking of running for U.S. Senate against Markey, and my daughter texted me from London. She just got her master's, Jordan. And the text was, please, Dad, don't run. Imagine that. Imagine that that's where we're at, where my 23-year-old daughter studying overseas is worried that her father might run again for public office and her father might say something that someone disagrees with. He might say something that somebody thinks is wrong. And maybe they'll label me something. Maybe they'll call me a white supremacist. Maybe they'll call me the same things that they called other people. And then that'll trigger some psychopath, some nut job to take a shot at me. That my daughter's got it. That's the first thought that goes in her mind. You know, that's why I say that this was an attack on our constitutional republic and not just on Charlie Kirk. You know, we were talking about these judges or these magistrates who are just letting these violent criminals roam the streets of Boston, the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina, wherever you are. I'd ask them, you know, part of their job, I think, should be to talk to the families of the victims, the people who are no longer here, people who have been murdered, like Charlie Kirk or that young Ukrainian woman in North Carolina. Talk to her family. The magistrate who let that piece of crap criminal roam the streets to murder her, maybe they should sit down and talk to the parents of that 23-year-old. You know, we also got to start thinking about how we hold these people responsible for their reckless endangerment of public safety. Cops get sued when they do things wrong, even though they have some forms of immunity. Should a judge just be off the hook? You're listening to The Hard Truth. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. You can reach the show, reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com. You can follow me on X at John E. Deaton and the number 1. John E. Deaton, the number 1. And if you need, or a loved one needs assistance with mesothelioma or lung cancer or any type of asbestos-related disease, for 25 years, I've been a lawyer in Massachusetts representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims. In fact, the Deaton Law Firm has sponsored this show. You can reach me at DeatonLawFirm.com. Anyways, enough of that. But I want to remind you that I do have a day job, and that day job is representing some of the greatest people I have ever met. I represent plumbers and pipe fitters and sheetrockers and roofers and engineers and electricians and auto mechanics, shipyard workers, you name it, in the trades, iron workers. I've represented asbestos insulation workers, obviously. Unfortunately, asbestos was in thousands of products. I've taken on Johnson & Johnson because of their baby powder. Had asbestos contaminated talc in it for a century, and they knew about it, and they did nothing. I've taken on the biggest corporations in the world fighting for everyday Bay Staters. And so the reason I ran for office against Senator Warren is I've been fighting for regular people my entire career. And so I figured I'd try to take the fight into the political world and represent them in Washington, because I don't think regular people are actually being represented. I think corporate interests are being represented. I believe billionaires and donors who line the pockets of our elected officials are there. I mean, why do you think they fight to stay in Washington so long? I mean, look at Ed Markey. Ed Markey's 80 years old. He's been in Washington, D.C. since 1976. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a young man anymore. But when Ed Markey first went to Washington, I was 8. I was an 8-year-old boy. That's how long he's been in office. He ran and got elected before Jimmy Carter was president of the United States. I mean, gas was 59 cents a gallon. It's incredible. And after 50 years, at 80 years old, he wants to run again. Why? Because they get addicted to the power. They get addicted to the money. They get addicted to the lifestyle. Imagine living off the taxpayer for half a century. Ed Markey is not only twice the age of the average voter in Massachusetts, he's been in office 10 years longer than the average Bay Stater has been alive. The average voter in Massachusetts is 40 years old. 40. Ed Markey's 80, and he's been in Washington 50 years. So that's a decade longer than many of you listening have been alive. It's insane, but why do they do it? Because it is a great gig, man. They don't want to give it up. They get addicted being called senator. They get addicted to being catered around, chauffeured around. They get addicted to the benefits, right? They exempt themselves from Obamacare. They exempt themselves from just about everything. They can insider trade so they can vote on bills, get that inside knowledge, and then make millions. You and I go to jail if we do that crap, not them. Nancy Pelosi is the best stock picker in America. She's worth $300 million. Ed Markey's worth millions for being an elected official? Come on, man. Right? Ed Markey wrote bad checks in the 90s, $47,000. That's over six figures in today's money. He didn't get charged one overdraft fee. His credit didn't get suffered like yours and mine would. He didn't get prosecuted like you and I would. We get prosecuted. We rode around writing tens of thousands of dollars in bad checks. Not Ed Markey. Nope. He belonged to a special bank for congressmen. And that bank would just pay the money off, right? He overdraft $47,000. They just pay it, basically giving him interest-free loans every month. And imagine that. These are the people voting. He votes to spend our money the way he spent his own personal money. Reckless, with reckless abandonment of all common sense. And now we're $37 trillion in debt. And now people are so desperate in this country that they're turning to socialism and saying, you know what, we're going to elect this Mondami guy in New York because he tells us he's going to get the groceries down and he's going to get rent control and he's going to give us free transportation and he's going to take money from the haves and give some of it to the have-nots. That's what he stands for. And that sounds good to them because they can't pay their bills. Okay? Something else that happened this week, Mayor Wu won the preliminary election. The top two, her and Josh Kraft, go on to the general election, and it was a landslide. And I got to tell you, it makes you think of what are the people in Boston thinking. Because Mayor Wu is a disaster, man. I mean, you know, earlier in the show, we were talking about crime. And Mayor Wu goes to Congress. She goes on national TV. She says Boston is the safest place, the safest city in America, safest city in the world. You can drive down Mass Cass and watch heroin get shot up on the public street. Okay? You can step on needles in Boston Common. She says that it's safe, yet in her own administration, you've got multiple indictments. All right? You've got city members on the take. We've got to get back to law and order. We've got to get back to holding people responsible. You rape a child, you're not seeing daylight again. You're certainly not going to go get $500 cash bond or bail. Okay. It's incredible. But apparently the voters in Boston want Mayor Wu to win. I don't get it. They won't even, they're making national news because they're fighting Trump and they're fighting Tom Homan and the ICE. And the reason that they're fighting them is because they don't want ICE here. But they're part of the problem. I saw Governor Healy talk about how an ICE car was parked outside a Spanish church, and that's terrorizing. Well, if you cooperated and said, I'm going to help you find the really bad guys, I'm not going to agree with, everything you do, but let's prioritize this. Let's get the bad guys out, right? Let's get the rapists, the drug dealers, the gang members. Can't we just get them? Like, our governor and the mayor of Boston should be cooperating with ICE about those individuals. You can draw a line and take issue with them. If they snatch a Tufts graduate student for writing an editorial that was against Israel, and now they're going to deport her, I'm against that. She exercised her First Amendment. I'll help you. I'll help you criticize the Trump administration about that. But let's first get rid of the gang members, right? Because in these Healy hotels, we've got people that were dealing fentanyl. They had money. They had weapons. You've had over 1,000 serious incidents in these so-called shelters from illegals. Can we clean that stuff up first? Let's fight Trump on that stuff. We should possibly fight Trump. But you can't fight Trump if the goal is to get rid of a rapist who raped children. That can't be the battle for you. You can't say, I'm not going to help the Trump administration get rid of MS-13 gang members. I mean, if that's the position you're going to take, then you are embracing absolute lawlessness. And it's discouraging to see Mayor Wu win to that level. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm insane by thinking that, voters would pick me over Ed Markey. Maybe because if I run, I'll have an R, Republican, in front of my name. And they just go, nope, that's never going to happen, John, because they're going to continue to elect these people like Mayor Wu and Governor Healy and my God, Ed Markey. Just remember, insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. That same definition applies to voter insanity, which is voting the same person in year after year after year, like 50 years, and expecting things to change. Maybe it's time to try something different. Maybe it's time to do something different. See you next week.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.